I'm at a hole for refusing to attend an apology dinner after my mother-in-law called me a bad mother at my son's funeral. I lost my son to congenital heart disease, and he did not survive the open heart surgery at the age of 1 year and 6 months. He was the greatest blessing I had in my life. Everyone kept telling me things will get easier with time. I know that no matter how much time goes by, I'll still be missing my baby and everything sweet about him. Mother-in-law and I were in constant conflict. Things always been bad between us, but in those months we reached our limit. She kept getting involved in my son's treatment and criticized every decision I made, claiming I didn't know how to handle my son's illness. We went low contact, but she kept causing issues occasionally. My husband was torn between our son's illness and his mother's issues. When my son passed away, she came to the funeral and caused a scene by arguing with me, knowing I had no energy for it. She used the fact that everyone was there so she could say it was my fault my son was born sick, and I didn't take care of him properly, that I didn't listen to her when she suggested other ways to treat his condition, and that I was the one who took their grandchild away from them and caused them heartache. She then loudly called me a bad mother. I had no idea how I kept my composure and kept standing on both feet. My mom and sisters responded by telling her to leave. My husband was sitting down crying. She then went to tell everyone I kicked her out as a way to hurt her further, and lied that I convinced my husband to ban her from visiting her grandson's grave. My husband later sent his side of family an email talking about my mother-in-law's behavior during and after our son's illness, and telling them he will no longer be seeing her. That had the family criticizing us, saying mother-in-law was just trying to do what was best for her grandbaby, and called us selfish for assuming we're the only ones struggling with this tragedy. We haven't seen his mom in 1 year and 8 months. I'm now 3 months pregnant. No one knew except my sister-in-law, brother-in-law's wife, but word got out, though we told her not to say anything. A week later, I had family members saying I was invited to a dinner hosted by mother-in-law so she could both apologize in front of the whole family and settle this issue before the baby's born. They said mother-in-law was regretful and offered to financially provide for her grandbaby, and they want to see that. I refused, but my husband surprisingly wants me to go. He had his grandparents calling me telling me that I'm a person with a good heart, and forgiveness is something I'm capable of giving. I told them I'll never be sitting at the same table with a person who called me a bad mother at my child's funeral. I still remember it vividly till this very day. My sister said this change of heart from mother-in-law is probably for the new baby. It could be, but I insisted I won't come. They're saying I'm making hard for everyone to move on and past this unresolved pain and should really go. Now for the top comments. Not day home. I work in nursing in ICU and I see people like your mother-in-law often. You were done so dirty and no one, absolutely no one will understand what you and your husband went through and the kind of horrific choices you had to make. People like to think modern medicine can cure anything, and it's just not true. Treatments can be ugly, invasive, and even lethal, and I would never blame you for a second for trying anything possible to keep your baby in this world. I also wouldn't blame you for a second if you decided not to go through with some of these harsh treatments. There is no right answer in these situations. Only you get to decide. I'm so sorry for your loss, and that you had to go through that. Maybe I'm biased, because I see people like you at work, making decisions no one should ever have to make while getting yelled at by other family who won't even come to visit the freaking patient. Easy to throw stones when you don't have to make such heavy decisions. You are so within your rights to never forgive that woman. I hope the best for your current pregnancy, and I'm sure this little light will help remind you and your husband what familial love really is. I felt sick to my stomach reading this. The pure audacity of this woman is beyond words. I have 2 thankfully healthy boys, and imagining going through with them what you did with your son makes me want to cry. How heart-shatteringly lonely, lost, and utterly destroyed you and your husband must have felt with her acting like an idiot towards you, instead of being a support you surely needed. She made your son's illness and tragic passing about herself, to posture in some weird way that if she had gotten to make the decisions, none of this would have happened. I'm assuming she's not a specialist doctor of some kind, so she had no footing to stand on. If she's a doctor, I'm at loss for words to describe how messed up that is too. I like the other poster suggestion. Make it clear to your husband that he is free to socialize with his mother, but it will never be in your shared home or in the presence of you or the baby. I feel this woman is unhinged enough to try to get grandparents' rights, Call CPS on you if you disagree with her on something. The money offers further manipulation to try to wrest even more control for herself. Oh, you won't let me actively undermine your parenting? No. No more money then. Not Day-Hall. Should be dead to me. F off into oblivion. My sister said this change of heart from mother-in-law is probably for the new baby. It absolutely is. She isn't sorry that she harassed stressed-out parents who are trying to manage the health care of a gravely ill baby. She isn't sorry that she berated a grieving mother at the baby's funeral. She is sorry that the consequences of her abhorrent behavior have led to her being denied access to a grandchild. There is absolute proof of this. The fact that she wasn't sorry until she learned a new baby's on its way. Some things should not be forgiven, and frankly, her behavior falls into that category. You are not Day-Hall here and should not compromise. The only thing that matters for the next 6 months are your health and stress levels, and both can be best managed by immediately removing from your life and one insisting on renewing contact with someone who abused you. You should tell your husband that no means no, and he's not to bring this up again. It's not up for discussion. Please also visit r/justknowmother-in-law for help in how to set boundaries and stick to them, and for the support you may need in doing so. First of all, thank you for taking the time to talk about my issue. I don't get enough people who can understand what I have been going through, especially now during my pregnancy. Some people expect me to be thrilled with no excuse like my pregnancy is supposed to erase or make up for my loss. It's the opposite. I worry too much over little issues, and to some it's normal, but I find myself stressing out all the time. I try to take it slow and continue with my therapy. I haven't directly talked to mother-in-law, but I have talked to everyone in the family. They keep saying she's sincere and wants nothing more than for us to be able to move past this conflict. I truly don't feel okay with the idea of having to sit with her at a dinner table after all she's said and done. No matter what her purpose is, I'm completely against it. My grief is still raw and I'm not ready to see her. I don't think I'll ever be. It might sound awful, but I'm not feeling I could give her what she wants. Now for the next story. Am I the a-hole for not wanting to throw a party for my daughter's coming out? My female 44 mother died last week after a very long battle against cancer, and I'm completely devastated. She got pregnant with me after a very traumatic event, and despite the pressure from my grandparents and the trauma, she refused to have a termination. They threw her out when she was 16, with no money, no support, but that didn't deter her. And as far as I can remember, she has always been the greatest and most loving mother. She was my hero, my best friend, and I don't know how I will be able to overcome her death. 2 hours after my mother's death, my daughter Amélie, female 20, decided that it was the perfect time to come out to cheer me up. Her words, not mine. I must admit that I was very unsettled by the loss of my mother, but I still tried to tell her that I was happy for her. Maybe not as happy as she expected, but I really tried to show her my love and support because she's my baby, and I want her to be happy and to know that I love her. The next day, she came to me saying that she forgave me for my attitude, and that she wanted to talk about the preparations for a coming out party. I was a little confused, but I asked her when she wanted to throw that party, and she said the coming Friday. I told her it was not possible because it was the day of her grandmother's funeral, that we could do it the next week, but not now. She was silent for a solid minute, and then all hell broke loose. She starts screaming at me, telling me that I'm a bad mother, as rotten as my grandparents, that I don't support her because I'm a freaking homophobic, that her girlfriend was right, that I'm a useless witch. I didn't even know that she had a girlfriend. I was so shocked I wasn't able to answer her, and it was my husband, alerted by the screams, who came and told her to leave our house immediately. Since that day, she refused to talk to me, my husband, or her brother. She doesn't answer our calls or messages, and she did not come to her grandmother's funeral. She told all her friends that I'm homophobic, that I've rejected her because of her true nature. All I can do is crying. I feel empty and heartbroken. Now I feel like an a-hole because I can't help but think that I was too focused on my pain, that I was not supportive enough, that maybe I should have made an effort and said yes for that party because it was important for my daughter. Everything is very confused right now, and I really need a different point of view. Not a-hole. You are grieving and you wanted to throw a party? She sounds like a very self-centered person. The worst. Not a-hole. Even if it wasn't a funeral, Are you obligated to throw a party about it anyway? I would say the expectation is that you accept her. She doesn't need a party. Not Dayhall. And when are you kicking out your 20-year-old ungrateful daughter? She'll spin it as homophobic. And who freaking cares? She's already done that. Your daughter, by what you describe, is a self-centered little brat who needs to be out on the street to see who really supports her. She forgave your attitude? WTF? Your mother just died and she moves the spotlight to her. Ridiculous. If my kid pulled out some BS like this, I'd give them 2 suitcases on the sidewalk with their clothes already packed. My daughter doesn't live with us, but we were helping her paying her rents because she lost one of her job and money's tight. Husband wants us to stop helping her. I know that he's right, and we will surely stop helping her. But I can't help but feeling bad. Am I the a-hole for telling my husband I won't be visiting his mother for Mother's Day? My husband is gone for military duties, and he called me today to ask if I would be going over next weekend to visit his mother for Mother's Day, to which I said no. Then I had to rehash what happened last year for my first Mother's Day. Backstory. Last year was my first Mother's Day. My baby girl was born September 2019, so May 2020 was my first Mother's Day. During a pandemic. My husband spent the day with me, but his mother called him and complained that we had not gone over to her house for Mother's Day. I told him he was more than welcome to go, but the baby and I were staying home and hanging out and enjoying my first Mother's Day. He had gone to his mother's on Friday for Mexican Mother's Day. I ordered her Mother's Day card and flowers and he took them to her. She never acknowledged the gifts, to me anyway. On the day of Mother's Day, the only people to contact me from my husband's family were my father-in-law and brother-in-law, and they both wished me a happy first Mother's Day. I was beyond grateful and expressed that to them. Shortly after Mother's Day, mother-in-law called me and told me she was upset that I didn't go to her house on Mother's Day. I politely told her that I too was hurt that she didn't even acknowledge me on my first Mother's Day. I also told her how the year prior when I was pregnant, she went out of her way to make comments to me about not being a mother yet when my father-in-law wished me happy almost Mother's Day. I was extremely hurt, but I kept it to myself. I had miscarried 2 babies prior to finally having my baby. I always felt like a mother. Her comments were hurtful. Mother-in-law then proceeded to tell me that she didn't need to acknowledge me on Mother's Day because I'm not her mother. I told her fair enough, but don't expect me or my child to celebrate you, because by your definition, you are not my mother, and you are not the mother of my child. She never apologized for her hurtful comments. We are cordial now a year later. But after that, I decided that I didn't want to spend any Mother's Day with her ever again. I brought this up to my husband, and he told me I need to suck it up, move on, and go over to his mom's. I said no. I am celebrating with my daughter and my own mother, and I have plans during the weekend anyway. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. Enjoy your Mother's Day, Mama. Opie's husband seems a little controlling. Trying to force her to go over there just seems weird. Good on her for not going anyways, but this kind of raises some red flags about him. Opie's husband is a mama's boy who never cut the cord. That's going to continue to be a problem, so keep putting your foot down, Opie. He wants to sweep her horrible behavior under the rug so no one rocks the boat. She's an adult who needs to take accountability for her behavior. Not the a-hole. The problem here is your husband, not the a-hole. Yeah, I think the husband needs to stop sucking it up and finally let his balls drop. Not the a-hole. Opie, you do you, boo. Happy Mother's Day. Not the a-hole. You're celebrating with your own mother and your husband is responsible for his. Even if he isn't in town, you can send her flowers and a card, or a call if that's available. That's what I suggested. That he could have flowers delivered to her. Send her a gift. Call her. Not my mother, not my responsibility. I'm responsible for one woman in Mother's Day, and that's my own mother. Now for the last story. Am I the a-hole for telling my sister-in-law nobody forced her to come when she complained about my food? My sister-in-law and I got along really well when my husband and I first met and were first married. Then she took offense when I ended up missing her 30th birthday party because I already had prearranged, prepaid plans with a couple of my friends. To clarify, the party was not on her actual birthday. It was 2 weeks earlier, and so I didn't see any reason to check the date with her. But but she could not accept me picking them over her, which is how she views it. Even my husband told her it wasn't fair to expect me to lose out, when it's not like I planned it on her actual birthday. But it hasn't been the same since. Ever since, whenever we're hosting my in-laws or whenever we bring food, she criticizes it. My husband and the rest of the family have called her out on being ungrateful. They have told her that she should let the party thing go, but she doesn't. My cooking or baking was never an issue before she got pissed about me not being there for her birthday. She used to ask me for recipes and would cook together for Christ's sake. This past weekend, we hosted a small dinner with family, both sides, to celebrate the impending arrival of mine and my husband's first child. Kind of like a baby shower, but smaller and much less fuss. Sister-in-law was going off on the food again, and I had enough. I told her nobody was forcing her to come if she hated my food so much, and maybe we would all be better off without her constantly crap-talking me through everything, even such a happy occasion. She was pissed. She was so pissed. Even more when only one relative, another sister-in-law, came to her defense or called me out. It's now created tension between the family, and I've been called a witch, an a-hole, a petty witch, all sorts of other stuff, and I feel bad for lashing out the way I did. Am I the a-hole? Now for the top comments. Not the a-hole. Sounds like you handled it perfectly. In the future, her choices are show up and shut up, you win. Stay home, you win. Show up and run her mouth again, in which case you can laugh. Roll your eyes in front of everyone and say, there she goes again. To make things even more fun, start a betting pool for how long it will take her to complain. Or if she has enough standard insults/tells, start a bingo card. The first person who gets bingo using her insults wins. Not the hell, by the way. If family members don't come to your defense when she insults you, they can't complain when you stick up for yourself. Where's your husband in all this? Why isn't he laying down the rules of behavior with his own sister in your own home? I'd stop inviting her. About time she experienced some consequences. Not the hell. This. What is your husband doing to stop this? It's his family, so he needs to make sure this harassment ends. Not the a-hole. Am I the a-hole for refusing to financially assist my uncle? Because when the situations were reversed, he didn't financially assist my parents and I. 15 years ago, my family suffered a series of unfortunate events that forced us on the edge of poverty. Fortunately, through the generosity of our extended family, we managed to make it through to the other end, if just barely. This generosity meant that much more, considering that most of my extended family themselves suffered from financial hardship. The exception is my uncle. At the time, he was several years into his career as an engineer at one of the top engineering firms, and yet he entirely ignored my family's plight. While my family struggled, Jeff was flaunting a 6-figure BMW, which is his right, of course. Though I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel some resentment. But I understand that this resentment stemmed from a place of entitlement. Fast forward 15 years, and fortunately my family are much better off. I've since graduated, almost a decade into my career, and I'm in the fortuitous position of being able to ensure that my family never has to worry about money ever again. In those same 15 years, my uncle has found his own engineering firm and was wildly successful, until the pandemic forced his business into involuntary administration. The situation is now dire enough that several months ago, my uncle began asking the extended family for financial assistance. But what he needed was beyond what the extended family could provide, though the extended family did do the best that they could. I've thus far kept silent. Unfortunately, that silence has not gone by unnoticed. My uncle called me earlier today asking for a $10,000 loan to keep his son enrolled in his son's private school. He tried to sell me some sob story about how disruptive it would be to my cousin's development if he would be forced to change schools in his pivotal development period. Frankly, I don't see how any of that is my problem. Had my uncle supported my family when we asked him for it, I would have gone to the moon and back for him, as I have done for the members of my extended family that did help my family. But he didn't, so why should I? Am I the a-hole? Now for the comments. Not the a-hole. I was thinking 2 wrongs don't make a right, and helping him out would be great, until I got to $10,000 loan to keep his son enrolled in his son's private school. So, if it were to keep your uncle off the street or out of the soup kitchen, I'd say help him. But to keep your cousin in an expensive private school? Nope, That's a luxury nobody needs, especially when you're in a financial trouble. His posh school is not your problem. Two wrongs absolutely make a right. Also, while we're on the topic, I always tell people to take the high road, so that way it will leave more room for me on the low road. Not today, home. A private school is not need to have. It is nice to have. He wouldn't even help you with need to have, so you most definitely do not need to finance his nice to have. Fully agree with this. Not today, home. He's not entitled to give you help, although it would have been nice and kind, but you're not entitled to help either. He wants to save face and keep his son in private school. His kid will be fine in a public school until he gets back on his feet. The fact that he couldn't even offer you guys $100 when you desperately needed it to keep food on the table, he now expects you to give him $10,000? Nuh-uh. God forbid you're in a bad financial situation again, because I don't see him offering help in the future. Not today, Ho. We call this karma. Also, $10,000 for private school? If we were in hardship, I would place my child somewhere else. Your uncle sounds entitled. Maybe he should sell his car. Next story is titled, Am I the a-hole for revealing to my wife's family we did purchase our house, but it was inherited from my mother? To start, I want to mention that my wife and my late mother never had a very strong relationship. Yes, they were cordial to each other, but had many disagreements. Mom passed away and left me a one-story house as my only inheritance. No one lived in it after she renovated it, so it looked fairly new. My wife was happy and excited when we moved in that she posted a video on social media and wrote that the house was bought with our money. I didn't know about her saying that until later. Her aunt was visiting from a distance to see the house my wife told her we purchased. We sat to eat and chat a bit, and her aunt brought up the house's value, asking how we could afford to buy it so suddenly. I was confused as my wife went on about putting money we've saved together towards buying it. I asked what she was talking about, and her aunt said my wife told her the house was bought with our money and cost X amount. I corrected her, saying this wasn't true, because this house belonged to my mom, and she gave it to me after her passing. I added that no, we're not doing well financially to be able to afford this house. Room went radio silence. My wife's aunt said, "What? I'm sorry, I didn't know that." My wife's cousin side-eyed her and said, "So, isn't this mother-in-law the same mother-in-law you hated for years? Shame she's not here, so you can thank her for leaving you this nice house." My wife was stunned at this point and excused herself to the bathroom. She didn't come out till they left. Then she blew up at me, asking why I told them the house was inherited from my mom, and making her look like a liar in front of them. I redirected a question at her and asked why she told them otherwise. She said there was no harm in showing off our new property, and that people will appreciate us more for saying we bought it with our own money instead of inheriting it. I argued that this was wrong and unfair for my mom, even if they never got along. She argued that I ruined her joy and humiliated her in front of her family, and because word got out, now everyone knows and will think she's a liar when I could have simply played along, since my mom wouldn't possibly mind it, or cause an issue over it now that she's deceased, so it won't matter to her. I stormed out after arguing with her, and refusing to admit I messed up and not being part of the lie. Am I the a-hole? Edit. I didn't know about what my wife was doing up until that dinner. I then discovered a social media post and how many family and friends thought this house was purchased with our own money. I even have no idea how long this has been going on. Made her look like a liar. Didn't make her look like one. Her own behavior made her a liar. Not today, Hole. Well, I ain't calling her a truther. Not today, Hole. She ain't no truther. Not today, Hole. She's the sole reason she feels bad. She's lucky to have an honest husband. She didn't tell you her story, meaning she knew that you wouldn't like it. She should have been honest with you instead of expecting you to lie. Also, I feel that it's not considerate or equal that she dismissed what you and your family was able to offer her, and instead take the credit. Disrespectful and manipulative. I hope she can come to her senses and take accountability for her actions. Not today, Ho. Your wife is a liar and should never have said that. Give credit where credit is due. Your mom deserves the credit. Plain and simple. Plus, it sounds like she was bad-mouthing your mom more than you know. The way the aunt said, "Oh, the woman you hated?" Definitely not today, Ho. Not today, Ho. She called you a liar? You were not the one who lied here. You did not know she had made up this act, How could you play along? And why would you? This is completely disrespectful to your mother and her memory. Regardless if they got along or not, you don't have to like someone to be respectful. You did not make her look like a liar or humiliate her. She made herself rightfully look like a liar and humiliated herself. She should not be upset with you at all. She should be upset with herself. She owes you and her family a huge apology. Now for the next story. Am I the a-hole for turning a family vacation home into an Airbnb and charging my cousin to have her wedding there? Some background. My grandparents owned a 4-bedroom lake house with about an acre of land for about 25 years. Through the years, they hosted many family events and people visited often to get a free getaway. Then last year, they wanted to move into a nice old folks home that's basically a resort. And to do that and finance the rest of the years, they sold their main condo and put this up for sale. I bought it at what was a fair rate at the time, and it has since gone up in value about 25% due to the recent housing surge. I just finished with some renovations and officially got it listed on Airbnb as a side hustle. This summer, I've gotten lots of requests from family to visit, and I've said no because it's being renovated. I also told them I intend to use it as an income stream, not a family vacation home. I got some pushback, but held firm. Well, now my cousin just got engaged, and they want to plan a May 2022 wedding on a specific day that has significance to them. This will end up being over Memorial Day weekend. My cousin Jean called me and asked if they could have it at the lake house since there's so much land for an outdoor wedding, and she and her fiancé met there years ago. His family's friends with our family. I told her that I anticipate renting it out that weekend, and that she can have first dibs for the days needed and sent her the link to reserve it. She then realized this would run her close to $6,000 plus deposits and service fees, so really like $8,000. She flapped out, saying that this is a family event at a family house, so I shouldn't charge. She then said it should be like my wedding gift. I told her, Jean, my wedding was 3 years ago, and you got me a set of knives, which I do like. It's not really fair to say I should basically give you $6,000. She flipped, called me greedy and a terrible family member, then hung up. Since this, my parents, aunt and uncle, and one sister all told me that I was being greedy as well. My brother who helped with the renovations is on my side 100%, and my grandparents told me they'd love to see a wedding there, but said they sold me the house with no conditions, so they won't pressure me. But I've been getting so much flack from a couple of people in my family. Edit. I'm done responding to comments now due to how many I've gotten, but to answer comment questions. In purchasing it from my grandparents, I made it clear that it would no longer be a family home and that I would be using it for an income stream. They knew this before selling. Jean and I are not close. She's one of 13 cousins on that side of the family. We are 7 years apart and see each other probably 1 to 2 times a year at most. Part of my thinking for charging is that I don't want my place to turn into a de facto family spot. It was not cheap. I had to take out mortgage to pay for it. For people not from the US, Memorial Day weekend is probably the most popular weekend for pool parties / lake house rentals, etc. It's literally the most valuable weekend to own a lake house. I told her to give her first dibs on it before opening it up to anyone, but it will easily get rented that weekend otherwise. The current price that people have called ridiculous is based off what the surrounding places of this size are going for. Since listing at that rate, it has been getting booked super fast. It have been encouraged to raise the rate. It is not overpriced for its market at all. What I would charge is actually less than what the average venue would charge for the number of guests she wants. She'd be saving about 40% from what a traditional venue would charge. I would also only charge the normal rate, not the holiday rate that Airbnb told me I should, and would for anyone else. So that is effectively a 30% discount off the bat. Now for the comments. I get why she asked. But she and your whole family, except brother and grandparents, have to remember this isn't a family property anymore. You shelled out cold, hard cash for it and spent more money renovating it. Not the whole. If she wants her wedding there, she has to pay. Maybe there's some sort of discount you could throw her way, but not required, and doesn't sound like she'd even appreciate it. It is no longer a family home. You used your money to purchase and renovate it. You need to make this clear to your family that it is not a vacation home for them to use. For all intents and purposes, it is a venue for those who rent out for party weekends, etc. I agree that you could offer them a discount for that weekend. If you do choose to offer them a discount, I would make sure that it is through the website so that any incidentals are covered / that is insured. Not day haul. This is why I think it's always a bad idea to buy what was once family property. The family that doesn't buy it always expects to continue using it. I inherited the 120-year-old family home. It took about 5 years for most of my relatives to stop assuming that they could just show up and stay with me for a week or whatever. Some of them still haven't learned, even after having the door shut in their faces. I'm not my grandmother or her father. I don't do drop-in long-term visitors just because they're family. You're the a-hole. Notice your grandparents try to gently persuade you? You are within your rights legally, but the cost to your familial relationship may be severe. It is interesting that you admit that the date is significant. They didn't intend it to be a holiday weekend, and you admit that they even met there, so it has sentimental connection. You could choose to make money and be viewed as the guy who ruined the family getaway, or you could decide to allow weddings to be held there. Not free annual vacations, just the big events, and be viewed as a generous and beloved family member. The one you prioritize is up to you. Last story. Am I the a-hole for adjusting the budget for gifts for nieces and nephews after my brother gained step-kids? My brother was a single dad to Kai, 10 male, and Ella 8 female since Ella was a baby. I was always a pretty generous aunt because for the most part, really expensive stuff were common interests. Game console, trampoline, go-kart, so they shared and didn't mind. I could also do more small stuff because it was 2 versus a bunch of them. I even secured them a PS5, thanks to a friend when the initial pre-orders went up and it cost me a ton. But it was a joint birthday gift for both. They have September and November birthdays. In October, my brother announced he was engaged and the wedding was 2 weeks away. We found out his wife lived across the country with her kids and was moving in the day before the wedding. It was a big surprise, but what was worse was, apparently, even though I got something for all kids, he was pissed off at me for spending less than I had past years. And he said nothing for months. Then his 6-year-old stepson's birthday was last week, and he confronted me afterward. He said I hadn't spent as much as I usually do, that I financially treated my bi-niece/nephew different to my step-nieces/nephews, and that the birthday gift showed that. I told him that wasn't true, and it was unfair for me to increase my budget to include 4 more kids, which would cost me thousands on Christmas alone and for birthday gifts throughout the year. I said I had budget for each kid at Christmas and had the same plan for birthdays. And that, yes, it was less individually than other years. But technically, I still spent more than I had previously. But I adjusted it so I could be both fair and not put myself into debt. He said it was still favoritism and hurt his step-kids, because they saw the stuff kind Al got from me the past years and what they got from me. I told him he couldn't expect people to spend the same per kid for 6 as they did for 2. Pointed out it was a huge difference. He thinks I was an a-hole for it. Am I? Is he right here? Not the a-hole. Your brother is not the sharpest tool in the shed. You are doing everything right. He moved his wife and her 4 kids in the day before the wedding. Obviously, he is not very sharp. Not the a-hole. First of all, gifts are extras, not things you should take for granted. Second, I would think his bi kids would have a harder time adjusting to everything in their life being turned upside down on such short notice. Had they even met their new siblings before they moved in? Third, how do these step-kids know who bought everything? Did your brother go through the house and label gifts with a giver and price tag? Something is wrong here. Either his new wife is pushing this, or is trying to compensate/smooth things over in your dime. They had met once before. About a month before they moved in with them, my brother took them for a visit. Not sure how they knew. It could be a huge exaggeration on my brother's part too. Not an a-hole. Your brother is an idiot who thinks you have unlimited funds and got used to you spoiling the kids. But instead of being grateful for everything you've given them thus far, that they can share with their step-siblings, he's angry because he can no longer afford to spend ludicrous amounts on 6 kids. He's probably feeling his finances aren't going as far as they used to, but is taking it out on the wrong person. My issue with the whole thing is the kids don't share a common interest anymore as a group. Kinda do, but what they like the others don't like. My step-nieces and step-nephews have different interests to each other, and different to what kind Ella like. So the one big gift thing is gone too. But I bet he will complain that I don't give anything for them all to use too. Am I the a-hole for asking my dad's brother to walk me down the aisle instead of my dad? I, 28 female, am getting married in the winter. Me and my dad were very close when I was growing up. When I was aged 16, my parents divorced after 20 years of marriage. Now, I don't blame him for this, and from the information I have, I can confidently say it's my mom's fault they divorced. However, after the divorce, he completely ignored all 6 of his children. He didn't make any effort to keep in contact with any of us, and the last time we heard or spoke to him was the night of the separation. For the next 8 years, I was the main earner for my family and was more like a parent to my siblings. During this time, I didn't keep in contact with anybody from my dad's side of the family. I had the phone numbers of a couple of my aunties/cousins, but didn't really speak to them apart from the yearly birthday or Christmas message. I only really saw one cousin of mine regularly, and that was the cousin who was my 19 male brother's best friend growing up. We'll call him Rob. Around about 5 years ago, I had a big falling out with my mother in which I left the house. At this time, I asked Rob for his mother's number so I could ask her to get in touch with my father for me. She gets her husband, my uncle, to ask his brother if I can move in with him, and my dad agrees to let me stay with him, even though I hadn't spoken to him in 7 years at the time. Later on, when I arrived at his home, tells me I can't stay at his and to go stay at a hotel or something. I call my uncle crying, and he says I can come stay with them instead. It seems as though my dad had agreed when his brother had confronted him, but changed his mind when he had gone home to speak to his wife. For the next 2 years, I lived at my uncle's house, and I consider his kids to be more like siblings now. My dad's siblings and cousins from that side of the family always meet up for gatherings multiple times a year, but I don't really communicate with my dad other than saying hello and goodbye at these gatherings. My uncle was there for me when even my own dad wasn't, and his family accepted me as their own, even though I'd barely spoken to them for 8 years at the time. My dad will be invited to the wedding, but I have asked my uncle to walk me down the aisle instead. He is happy I ask him, but is unsure if he wants to accept because he doesn't want to disrespect his older brother and walk his own daughter down the aisle in front of him. I feel as though my dad doesn't deserve to walk me down the aisle, as he didn't have the backbone to stand up to his own wife over his daughter. My uncle even told me he tried to justify himself to his siblings by saying, "They didn't try to keep in touch with me, so why should I look after her?" I'm not being funny, but as being a 16 female at the time and I was the oldest child as well, it wasn't my responsibility to. It was his. Am I the a-hole for asking my dad's brother to walk me down the aisle instead of him in front of him? Now for the top comments. Not the a-hole. You aren't entitled to walk a daughter down the aisle that you abandoned twice. Not the a-hole, but your uncle is also allowed to say no. The rift between him and his brother may not be worth it. Plus, he could be worried that it could cause unnecessary drama on your wedding day and ruin your wedding, which it very well might. Honestly, at this point, I'd be walking down the aisle by myself if I were you. Not Dayhall. Your dad hasn't been in your life. You're asking someone who has. It's likely your dad will be hurt by this. If you chose to, you could explain the situation in a letter to him, and if you chose, open up the idea of trying to restore the relationship. But perhaps he needs some consequence. Not Dayhall. You can tell your uncle that there's no reality where his older brother will be walking you down the aisle. It's either he walks you or you walk alone. This. He gets to decide that it will cause him too much grief. But if you make it clear that there is no possibility that you will walk with your bio dad, you're definitely not Dayhall here. You took care of your siblings and cousins when your father wasn't around. You even tried to get in contact with him. I don't think he deserves to walk you down the aisle. It should be who you want, who respects you and you could trust. Best wishes for your marriage. Now for the next story. Am I the a-hole for uninviting one of my best friends to my wedding? Early last year, one of my college best friends told me that she was getting engaged before she told anyone else knew because she wanted to hire my mom as her wedding planner. A couple of days later, she got engaged and told all of our friends that my mom, a professional wedding planner, would plan her wedding. All good until that point. After a couple of meetings with my mom, Lucy stopped responding to my mom. And I noticed by WhatsApp group that she hired all my mom's vendors directly without even telling us. She chose June 2021 as her wedding date. I let that one go because I didn't want to ruin her wedding. Last November, I also got engaged and chose September 2021 as my wedding date to give our friends some time between the two weddings, especially because mine is out of town. Later on, I found out again by a group that she had postponed her wedding to the day after mine. Of course, I was furious, and I had no problem letting her know that time. She finally contacted me and explained that she had no money for the wedding in June, and the day after my wedding was the only available date this whole year in her venue. Again, that's what my mom showed to her, without a contract, just because she was my friend. To be honest, I don't buy it. But now I'm the a-hole in our friends group because I uninvited her and was rude to her, and it was not her fault because she has no job. I still feel like she's not the kind of person you call your friend, and does not give me the energy I want to have on my wedding day. Am I the a-hole for this? Not the a-hole. Your mom took the time to plan everything for her. As it's her job, then she just contacted the vendors behind her back. That's already rude. Also, what was she trying to accomplish by moving the date? Reusing your decorations? Having people come to your wedding and just stay one day longer so she doesn't have to cover any costs for guests? I don't get it. Yep. And then she can steal all the designs Opie's mom does for daughter's wedding. Reminder that Opie's wedding is out of town and not at the same venue as former best friend. If anything, this was a ploy to make the friends choose between which wedding they want to attend. And if they wanted to attend both, they'd have to not have too much fun at Opie's wedding. Traveling while hungover surely sucks. And ultimately have to likely leave Opie's wedding early to be able to travel back in time for friend's wedding. But if she had no money for June, how's she going to come up with money just 3 months later? Not a hole. That's what I was wondering. Vendors and venues are expensive and she has no job. Not sure what miracle she is expecting they're going to want to be paid. She is planning a wedding she can't afford. Your friend was already the a-hole when she used your mom's services and then went behind her back. Not the a-hole. I'd explain that to your friend group. Not the a-hole. Lucy is clearly a leech in this situation from what you've said. I would do everything possible to either immediately distance yourself or do it over time so it's one of those sadly we grew apart things. I'm not sure how many vendors/locations/services overlap, but I would call yours and tell them a bit about the situation. As someone suggested, she might try to mooch off you and tell the vendors you said it was okay to reuse certain items or ask for a discount because they'd already there. You can tell the people you hired that someone you thought was a friend changed their original wedding date to the day after yours, and you do not give permission for anything specifically for your wedding to be reused for theirs. The beauty of that is, you don't even have to say names. If she used the same people and were booked from June to September, they'll know instantly who it was. Or even if she decides to hire them now, that date and any money-saving request will raise red flags and help them avoid her if they want. I could be reading/imagining this wrong, but I think Lucy might be a diva bridezilla, and no one wants to deal with that. Next story. Am I the a-hole for getting upset that something I had originally said is okay regarding my wedding? Hello. I was supposed to get married last year, but due to the obvious issue, it had to be cancelled and we moved it to this year. Finally, my area is doing well in terms of the virus. The cases are lower every day, the vaccination process is going well, and the regulations are relaxed, and everything is almost back to normal. I'm getting married in a month, and I couldn't be happier. I have a no-kids wedding, and I had notified everyone that it's a no-kids wedding, so they could tell me whether they'll be able to attend or not. I said it's fine if you can't find a babysitter for the day, and I won't judge if you can't afford to have a sitter or you can't find one and you won't be able to attend. I just said I'd like to be notified at least 2 weeks prior to the wedding, because that's when I'm gonna give the list of the guests to the venue. 4 of my friends and a cousin of mine called me earlier this week to tell me they won't be able to attend because they can't find or afford a babysitter. They wished me well on the wedding. I got very upset. They knew for an entire year that I was planning a no-kids wedding, and they couldn't figure something out, which tells me they don't actually care about me. The phone calls of the 4 friends were separate and happened in the span of 2 days, yet my cousin actually visited me to give me the wedding gift and tell me she won't be able to attend. My cousin was the last one to tell me, and I went off. I told her how I feel like my wedding is not important to them if they can't figure out how to leave their kids alone for 1 day. My cousin then said how I'm being unfair, because I had previously said it's fine if we can't attend because of the kids for whatever reason, and then I said that I'm being notified last minute. And she pulled the argument that they notified way before the 2 weeks notice before the wedding, and that they notified more than a month before it. I told my cousin to leave my house because I needed to think. I called my mom to ask for advice and also consulted my fiancé. But they both told me that I'm overreacting because the girls met my wishes and notified 1 month prior, and how I was the one that said it's not a problem if you can't attend because of the kids. I said I felt it was unfair that they'd put their kids above my wedding when it was just for one night. And my mom scolded me and said I'm being too entitled for expecting people to put their kids' needs or their financial issues aside because I'm getting married. And that my wedding might be the most important thing to me, but it's not the most important thing to everyone else. And if someone has to attend 10 weddings a year, it's natural they won't be able to meet the needs of every single one. So, am I the a-hole for getting upset at something I previously said I wouldn't mind? You are the a-hole because of this attitude. I said I felt it was unfair that they'd put their kids above my wedding. If there is someone out there that doesn't put their kids over your wedding, or any wedding, then they are crappy parents. I understand why you want a kid-free wedding, and that is your right. The other side of that coin is that some people with kids won't come to the wedding for lots of reasons involving their kids. That is their right. You ask for a notice, and they were polite enough to give it to you. That line takes her from a-hole to bridezilla. Why not both? You're the a-hole. You said it was okay and gave them a deadline, and now you went back on that. Childcare is hard to keep, and often people won't know for sure if they have it until a week or two before an event. You've given no reason why you aren't the a-hole here, and every reason that you are. But it's her wedding. How could they not drop everything to be there on her day? You're the a-hole. You gave a deadline. They followed it. An invitation is an invitation, not a summon. With the pandemic, people's lives have changed, particularly financially. And it's been really tough on kids. It might be harder to find a babysitter because of other people's lives changing. Maybe they are not comfortable going to a big wedding due to COVID, and are just trying to say it's because of a babysitter because you had said that initially. Also, maybe you're just a bridezilla in general, and they're using this because they don't want to go. That last reason. Why do I get the feeling that's likely the real reason? You're the a-hole. Don't plan a no-kids wedding, and then throw a tantrum because people with kids can't attend. Last story is titled, Am I the a-hole for telling my dad I want nothing to do with his secret second family? My 19 female dad, 15 male, has been having a long-term affair with a woman for over a decade. Their relationship began while he was married to my mom, and he stayed with her even while he dated and was engaged to a different woman after my parents' divorce. I don't think his latest ex ever knew about her, but I'm not sure. She has a kid, although it isn't his, which I do believe. I knew about his affair long ago, and after a big fight, basically said I never want to hear about her again or have anything to do with it, and then I'd be fine. This went okay for a decent amount of time. He would go on work trips and all, but I never asked questions and he never shared. And I was honestly fine being in the dark about it. I never approved, and he knew this, but I let him live his life so long as I was never brought into it. He tells me today he has invited them out to visit. I still live at home right now, and would love for me to be polite while they're here. I told him absolutely not, that I would go to a friend's house for the duration of their visit, but I would not be seeing them at all. That woman caused a lot of traumas during my childhood and aided in my parents' divorce, and I don't condone women who knowingly be the other woman. I never want to see her, and I made that clear. I said he can live his life as he wants, but I will not be dragged into that. He was pissed, went off on me saying it's his life, and I'm the child here, so his day is what goes. He ended by saying to lose his number, and honestly, that would be fine with me if he would throw away his actual child for this other family. I wanted nothing to do with that. Am I the a-hole for telling him a hard pass and playing happy family with his affair family? Not the a-hole. You do not have to let this man have his cake and eat it too. It's about time there's consequences for his selfish choices. Did he actually say lose his number? Wow. He is so callous and selfish to easily discard his family at will. Cheats, then discards Opie. Yeah, Opie's father is a huge a-hole. I had narcissistic parents growing up and it was awful. Not the a-hole, Opie. I'm sorry you had to deal with that. Not today, Hall. I know he's your father, but honestly, do you really want this person in your life? This. I don't get why the other woman is persona non grata, but you're okay with Dad. He's the one who broke marriage vows. I'm by no means okay with what my dad has done and is actively doing. He's my dad, and sadly that complicates things, and I didn't want to lose my remaining parent if I could help it. We have a very rocky relationship. That is at the forefront. As for the woman, I do blame her as well. She was a family friend and knew my dad was married and had kids when they got together. She caused a lot of issues during my parents' marriage, with sending taunting messages to my mom, which caused arguments that I ended up in the middle of as a child. My dad was the married man, but she wasn't an innocent that was kept in the dark about the situation. I guess it's just easier to be totally no contact with her since I have no emotional connection to her at all, whereas it's harder with my dad because he and I do have that. Wow, your father is the massive a-hole, not you. I'm 100% with you. That's awful. I wouldn't want to see her either. Ever. She destroyed your childhood, and your father is appalling too, and you have tried and been very reasonable overall, ignoring his work trips, etc. But this is too much. But it's his home, and yep, his life, so you have few options. I'd find a way to move out, away from your father. It's disgraceful. Am I the a-hole for refusing to help my siblings with our mother's funeral plans and for telling them I do not want to be named in her obituary? My mother died 2 days ago. My siblings were all with her when she died. I was not. She was a bully to me and hated my guts for as long as I can remember. Not sure if it was the fact that I was the kid who looked so much like Dad, the fact she was young when she got pregnant with me and resented me for it, or whether I was just unlucky. But she gave me a horrific childhood. And my dad died when we were all young, so I was left to watch her dote on my siblings and treat me like trash. I got to hear all the time that I ruined her life, that she wished she had aborted me, that she dreamed of me dying and getting the relief knowing she'd never have to see me again. I ended up staying with friends from the age of 15, and I hadn't seen her since my 20th birthday, when she showed up with my siblings and told me she wanted to puke just looking at me. I never told her I was gay. Never introduced her to my partner or my children. When my siblings called to tell me she was dying, I was so happy. Knowing she's gone, knowing that the woman who hated me for reasons out of my control, who made sure I know how much she never wanted me, filled me with such a feeling of relief. But of course, my siblings are heartbroken. They wanted me to be involved. I told them no way, no how. I said she was a great mother to them and that was fine, but she was evil to me. She was evil and made my childhood hell, and I was not a grieving child, and was not spending a single second giving her a nice send-off, or spending a single cent on it either. They got mad, told me it should be split between all of us. They had already planned her obituary, and told me how bad I would look if I don't help plan or don't show up. So, I told them to get my name off the obituary because the woman they described was not my mother. We argued. They told me I was behaving just as badly as her by taking it out on them, when they did nothing wrong. I told them I just wanted them to leave me out of it. I told them to pretend we're half siblings, and I have a different mother out there if it helps. They told me I could at least do it for them, and to think about how hard this has been for them. The fighting just keeps on going, and it actually delayed the funeral planning since they spent more time trying to convince me than doing any planning. They keep asking for my opinion, etc., trying to draw me in, then get mad and tell me I am treating them badly. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. Your siblings can't force you to be involved. Your experience of her as your mother is clearly very different to theirs. Stand firm. And tell them again that you are not interested. You will not be going and you will not be contributing financially. Tell them you are not going to be discussing the subject again. Or you could agree to be in the obituary, so long as the whole thing begins with the line, "Ding dong, the witch is dead." That should make them back off. Not the a-hole. I suspect that they really want to split the cost of the funeral and this is why they are pressuring you. Not the a-hole. That said, you may want to be slightly involved for the sake of your relationship with your siblings. As you suggested, you can think of them as half-siblings with a different mom. If your half-siblings just lost their mom, how would you react? Would you be consoling? Would you consider chipping in if they were short on money? Would you want to be around for those half-siblings even though they're grieving a stranger to you? If the answer is yes, then consider helping out. If the answer is no, then stay firm. I would, assuming the person wasn't evil to me, but I hate the idea of helping give her a nice send-off. That's where the issue is. I'd love to just leave her to rot and end up forgotten. Next story. Am I the a-hole for stealing my sister's baby? My 29 little sister, female 21, we'll call her Jane, has a 14-month-old baby girl we'll call Sarah, whom I have had custody of since late June of 2022. Jane was divorcing her husband, jobless and homeless. I offered to take temporary guardianship of Sarah so she would be safe and cared for while Jane got her life together. At first, she turned me down. However, after Sarah was dropped off to our mom's house in dirty clothes and an old diaper by a stranger, while she was supposed to be under the care of her father, Jane agreed to give her to me and my wife. Now, we made clear that it would be temporary, and that Jane would still have full access and could get Sarah back whenever she felt ready. However, during the last 6 months, Jane has completely disappeared from Sarah's life. She doesn't ask about her. She doesn't make any effort to visit her. She doesn't ask us to bring her to visit. She has gotten a job and an unsafe place to stay, yet hasn't offered to take any financial responsibility, not even in the form of buying her gifts. She doesn't call to talk to her or see her. I spoke to Jane recently about all this, and her defense is that it's too emotionally hurtful to see Sarah because of how much it hurts and how much she misses her. Her other excuse is that she doesn't have a car or enough money to afford Ubers or diapers. I told her how absolutely ridiculous all that is. You don't need a car or money to call or text. We have always made clear we'd be willing to bring Sarah to her, and she spends a wasteful amount of money on food and vapes. Even after speaking to her about the things she should or could be doing, she still has made no changes. Because of this, my wife and I have decided to look into our legal options for adoption. Sarah has legally been abandoned, and we only need to keep her a little longer before the courts would allow termination of Jane and her husband's rights, as husband is even more missing in action than Jane is. Jane is livid about this, and is threatening all kinds of things, but has done nothing. Important information. After I offered originally, and before we actually got physical custody of Sarah, my wife and I attempted IVF and failed. We haven't told anyone about this, even family. However, I told Jane about this on day 1, just so that there would be full honesty and so that none of this would seem sneaky if it were to come out later. Jane is bringing this up in a very hurtful way during all this, saying that I'm trying to steal her baby, since we can't have one of our own though we have one adopted son already. And this is very far from the truth. We are genuinely worried about the safety and well-being of Sarah if she were to go back to Jane, and the fact that Jane has essentially ghosted her baby. We feel we have every right to pursue permanent guardianship and adoption. So, am I the a-hole? Edit, as several people have asked, why don't I take in my sister too? I don't have space or money for an adult. Sarah has a bed in our room, and we spend about $700 a month on her. There is no way we could cover an adult too. And even if we could, she's not someone I would live with. She is a very unclean person, doesn't shower nor wash her clothes, and hangs out with junkies and other questionable people. She lost her last living situation because her roommate was arrested for possession of meth at home. My wife and I have a 7-year-old son, and now Sarah to protect. Not a hole. Saying you stole Sarah is just Jane's way of abandoning her child while absolving herself of the guilt. I imagine the emotions there are pretty complicated. Stop worrying about Jane or looking bad and take comfort in the fact that you are doing what is best for Sarah. Anyone who believes Jane over you isn't worth having on your team anyway. Good luck. Not the a-hole. I am an adopted kid. My mom was an addict and knew she wouldn't get her life together. Look, wait until she can legally sever ties and don't bring this up again. Keep track of every time you reach out asking for assistance or offer to take the little baby to Sarah to her mother, and she refuses or misses an appointment. In California, it's 15 months to sever ties. Do not leave her unsupervised. Once you hit your state's threshold, lawyer up and make your case. If legally you have already temporary custody, a good portion of the battle is won. It's better to maintain the status quo and peacefully win the war than preempt an uphill battle in the family court. Bide your time, make your case open and close, and then formally adopt your daughter. I wish you all the best. Thank you. This is exactly the plan. Where does the rest of your family stand on this issue? Will they support you in this process? My mom is on the fence, but all my siblings are on my side. If your mother ever gives you pushback, You should remind her how Sarah was delivered back into her life, in dirty clothes and an old diaper. Next story. Am I the a-hole for not including my grandchildren's stepmother, step and half siblings in a family book? My youngest daughter died 9 years ago. She left behind a husband, Joe, and 3 children. My granddaughter is now 17 and my grandsons are now 16 and 15. Joe has since remarried to a lovely woman, Marie. Marie has a son and a daughter from a previous marriage, and she and Joe had a 5-year-old together. We get along fine with Marie and the other children, though I would not say we are very close, and we are definitely not like we were when my daughter was alive. That appears to now be a problem. You see, there is a book, a scrapbook type of book, where we add new members of the family to it, and the children born get little updates about them until they're grown. It was started by my grandmother, and continued by my mother and now me. It's not in the best condition, but we cherish it in the family, and those who are gone. When we look back, there's little memories in there to make us smile. Well, I do not have Marie or any of her children in this book, but they're aware of the book's existence from Joe and from my grandchildren. My oldest granddaughter and her partner became parents recently, and the book became a hot topic. And Marie was unhappy that my great-grandchild was included, but not her and her kids, because my great-grandchild is not related by blood. Joe told me the kids would love to have their whole family added to it, but then my grandchildren claimed something different, and it has become such a mess. Joe, Marie, and I eventually sat down to discuss it, and they told me they feel like Marie and the kids should be shown full acceptance, as part of the whole family and included. Marie also added that she should be added where Joe is, which is pages joined to my daughters, and I said that would never happen. She told me and her kids are just part of my family, but I told her she is not. I made it very clear she will never be my daughter. Joe told me it would set a good example for my grandchildren, for them to fully embrace Marie and the children, to drop the need for step, and see that they are all accepted just as much as he and they are. And I told him I could not do that. That I love him, that I love my grandchildren, but I do not love Marie or their other children. That I like them and they are good to have around, but it is not the same. Now they're angry, while my grandchildren are upset their dad wanted Marie and the other kids to be in the book. Marie called me a terrible grandmother in person, and that she had told her kids I was grandma, and now I had made their lives so much more terrible. Am I the a-hole? Now for the comments. Not the a-hole. This woman is basically a stranger to you. You don't owe it to her to be added in the family book. And your grandchildren understand this as well. The issue is Joe and Marie. I imagine the grandchildren are hurt and feel like she's trying to shove into their memories of their mother. Love that dad lied about his kids' feelings too. Glad grandma asked them directly. I don't understand these people who marry a widow/widower and can't accept they're a widow/widower. Like, just marry someone who doesn't have that baggage if you don't want to deal with it. Not the a-hole. This is a very clear-cut case of not the a-hole. Marie and her children are not related to you by blood. Marie is not married to your son or daughter. Marie is married to your late daughter's widowed husband. Joe only happens to be in the book because he was married to your daughter, who has since died. Joe, too, has no connection to you anymore. Since your daughter is no longer around to have a say, her children need to do that for her. And they have. They don't want Marie and her children in this book. Joe should be happy that you're continuing the tradition for your daughter's children. For his older children, his mother has died, and so should Marie. If Joe and Marie care so much, they should have started a new book years ago for their own blended family. But they cannot demand that extended family members do the same. This is yet another case of step-parents trying to force relationship with their stepchildren. And in this case, she's trying to replace the dead wife/mother. I don't understand why people can't understand that step-parent is an important relationship that can exist separately from children's love for their biological parents. Last story. Am I the a-hole for telling my adult sister that our family isn't cursed because our parents got divorced? My 37 female sister Jan, 41, can't get over our parents' divorce. Our parents have been divorced for over 20 years. Growing up, it was evident from a young age that their marriage was messed up. Dad even cheated a lot and never tried to hide it. When I was 6 and Jan was 9, Dad got Mom a dozen roses. Using context clues from things I remember at a time and confirmation from family, he was trying to apologize for an affair that got out of hand, which led to a huge fight. A few years later, Jan saw something romantic/cutesy on TV and asked why he never got Mom flowers. Dad said, Roses are cursed and make your mom mad at me. Jen periodically brings up the roses are cursed BS every few years. I can't keep track of what upsets Jen. She also thinks dates that end in a 1 or 2 are cursed. Blue trucks on the highway are cursed. Types of food and a bunch of other stuff nobody should be expected to remember. It was my mother's birthday this weekend, and her boyfriend hosted brunch. I wasn't thinking and got Mom an arrangement that included roses. Mom loved it and put it in the kitchen. Jen showed up later with her family, all smiles, until about an hour later when she went into the kitchen, let out a blood-curdling wail, and started crying that roses were cursed and made Mommy divorce Daddy. She then ranted that I cursed the family by bringing roses into the house on Mom's birthday. I snapped and said Mom and Dad got divorced because Dad was banging his way through our whole zip code in the 90s. Flowers aren't cursed. We are not cursed. That Dad made bad choices. And if she couldn't come to terms with that, then she needed to seek treatment because her behavior wasn't acceptable or normal. She looked at me like I had interrupted her Oscar speech. She and her husband then left and we tried to salvage the day. Mom's boyfriend thanked me, but Mom and our aunt say I'm the a-hole and that Jen is sensitive and delicate and I should have known better than to bring flowers. My husband doesn't care. He just won't go to family functions with Jen there now. Not the a-hole. Your sister clearly has a lot of unprocessed trauma from the divorce. This is absolutely not normal for a grown woman to react this way 20 plus years later. She needs serious therapy. I work with one of her former coworkers, and apparently she flipped out similarly when a colleague of hers was sent roses from her husband, which led to her being fired. This happened about 7 or 8 years ago. She was around 17 when your parents divorced? She sounds like a flipping toddler. This weird superstition is adversely affecting her family and career. You are totally right. She needs help. And what the heck does she think roses are going to do? Your parents are already divorced. Roses aren't going to make them get a second one. Not the a-hole. I was about 17. She was 21, I think. Definitely not the a-hole. Your sister is unhinged. She definitely needs therapy. She's in denial. And I think about your father and why they divorced. And it's made her the way she is. So when this outburst happened, it's almost like she was in a dissociated state and was speaking as if she was a child again. I think that's giving her a little too much leeway. She 100% knows what she's doing. Not the a-hole, but you and her didn't live the same past. This was a really tough one for me to learn. That my trauma from our childhood isn't the same as my brother's and sister's trauma, even if we lived through the same event. It seems like these curses are a way for her to control things that can be controlled and are overwhelming for her. I get it seems like she's victimizing herself, but maybe she doesn't have the same emotional strength, mental skills, or tools that you do. It's okay you snapped. Family is super frustrating, but try to remember something that scares you doesn't scare someone else. Something that makes you laugh doesn't make someone else laugh. Trauma and memories are the same way. I get that, but after a certain amount of time, 20 years perhaps, we don't have to continue to be held hostage by someone else's traumatic outbursts.